The illusion of self. We are taught from an early age that we have a self, a unique, identifiable individual essence that separates us from others. But is the concept of self real? What if everything we know about our individuality is an illusion? According to Eastern philosophies like Buddhism, the idea of a permanent self is nothing more than a mental construct, a collection of thoughts, feelings, and experiences that we mistakenly believe to be an enduring identity. Imagine for a moment that you are not a single, continuous self, but rather a constantly changing flow of experiences. Each thought, emotion, and action is simply a temporary state, like waves on the surface of an ocean. If we break down our sense of I, we discover that it is made up of countless fragments, memories, desires, habits that come and go. There is no single, unchanging core. Instead, the self is fluid, ever shifting, and ephemeral. But if the self is an illusion, what does this mean for our understanding of who we are? If we can let go of the idea of a fixed identity, we may begin to understand that our true nature is not limited by the boundaries of the self. We are interconnected with everything around us, part of the larger fabric of existence. This realization can lead to a profound sense of liberation as we no longer feel the need to defend or cling to a false sense of identity. By accepting the illusion of the self, we can free ourselves from the anxiety that comes with trying to maintain a consistent, rigid idea of who we are. But this raises a further question. If we are not our self, then who or what are we? Are we simply an illusion? Or is there a deeper truth that transcends our individual identities? In the absence of a fixed self, can we truly experience life as it is, free from the burden of ego and self-identity? The nature of reality. What is reality? We often assume that the world we perceive through our senses is an accurate reflection of what truly exists. But is that really the case? From the moment we wake up, we are surrounded by a constant flow of sensory information. We see, hear, taste, touch, and smell the world around us. But what if everything we perceive is, in fact, an illusion? The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that the world as we know it is shaped by the limitations of our senses and the structures of our mind. Our perception of reality is not a direct reflection of the external world, but rather a constructed experience shaped by our cognitive faculties. In other words, we never truly experience reality as it is. We experience a version of it filtered through our senses and our minds. This idea challenges the very foundation of how we understand the world. If our perception of reality is merely a subjective experience, then how can we ever truly know the truth about anything? Are we trapped in a world of illusions, unable to access the true nature of existence? To further complicate matters, modern physics suggests that the nature of reality is even more mysterious than we once thought. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles behave in ways that defy our conventional understanding of the world. They exist in multiple states at once, and their behavior is influenced by the observer. In this sense, reality itself seems to be malleable, constantly shifting based on our perception and interaction with it. This raises a profound question. If reality is shaped by our perception, then can we change the world simply by changing the way we see it? Is reality truly as fixed as we believe, or is it something we create through our consciousness? The problem of free will. Are we truly free to make choices, Or is everything in our lives determined by forces beyond our control? The question of free will has fascinated philosophers for centuries, and it remains one of the most debated topics in philosophy today. On the one hand, we feel as though we have the power to make decisions, to choose our actions, and to shape our destinies. On the other hand, many believe that every action we take is determined by prior causes, whether they be genetic, environmental, or even cosmic. One of the key arguments against free will is determinism, the idea that every event, including human actions, is the result of preceding causes. If everything in the universe operates according to fixed laws, then our choices are not truly free. They are merely the inevitable result of prior events. In this view, our sense of freedom is an illusion. We are not the masters of our own fate, but rather, we are being carried along by the current of cause and effect. But if determinism is true, does this mean we are not responsible for our actions? If everything is predetermined, then it would seem unjust to hold people accountable for their choices. This dilemma has led to the development of various theories of compatibilism, which seek to reconcile the idea of free will with determinism. Compatibilists argue that while our actions may be determined by prior causes, we can still be said to act freely if we are acting according to our desires and intentions. However, the problem of free will raises a deeper question about the nature of human existence. If we are not truly free, then what does it mean to live a meaningful life? How can we find purpose and fulfillment in a world where our choices may not be as free as we believe? The tension between free will and determinism invites us to reconsider our assumptions about agency, responsibility, and the nature of human freedom. The paradox of happiness. What does it mean to be happy? In modern society, happiness is often seen as the ultimate goal, something we should strive for above all else. We are constantly told that we need to find happiness in our relationships, our careers, our possessions, and our experiences. But despite all of our efforts to achieve happiness, many of us find that it remains elusive, slipping through our fingers like sand. The paradox of happiness is that the more we chase it, the harder it becomes to attain. Research has shown that the pursuit of happiness can actually make us less happy as we become obsessed with the idea of attaining it and constantly measure our progress against unrealistic expectations. The more we focus on finding happiness, the more we become anxious and dissatisfied when it doesn't come as easily as we expect. Moreover, the very idea of happiness is problematic. What does it mean to be happy? Is it a fleeting feeling of joy, or is it a deeper, more lasting sense of contentment? Can happiness even be defined, or is it an individual experience that varies from person to person? And if happiness is so difficult to attain, does that mean that life is inherently meaningless, or is there something else that we should be striving for instead? The paradox suggests that perhaps we should stop trying to pursue happiness directly and instead focus on living a meaningful and fulfilling life. When we stop obsessing over our happiness, we may find that it naturally follows as a byproduct of living authentically, of pursuing our passions, and of engaging with the world in a way that is meaningful to us. In this sense, the pursuit of happiness may be less about striving for an ideal state of mind and more about embracing the journey of life itself. The concept of death. Death is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. It is something we all must face, yet it is something we cannot truly understand until we experience it ourselves. Throughout history, philosophers, theologians, and scientists have attempted to grapple with the concept of death, but it remains one of the most profound and unsettling aspects of human existence. One of the central questions about death is whether it marks the end of existence or whether there is something beyond it. Many religious traditions teach that death is merely a transition from one form of existence to another, whether that be an afterlife, reincarnation, or union with a higher power. In contrast, existentialist philosophers like Jean Paul Sartre argue that death is simply the cessation of life, and that any belief in an afterlife is a form of self deception. For Sartre, death is the ultimate absurdity, a reminder that life is fragile and fleeting, and that we must create meaning in the face of our inevitable mortality. But even if death is the end of consciousness, it is still a deeply meaningful event. The awareness of our own mortality shapes the way we live. It motivates us to seek meaning, to form connections with others, and to make the most of the time we have. Death, in this sense, is not something to be feared or avoided, but rather something that gives life its urgency and significance. The question then becomes, how will you live knowing that your time is limited? The concept of death invites us to reconsider our priorities, to live with intention, and to embrace the impermanence of life. In the face of death, we are reminded that what truly matters is not the pursuit of material wealth or fleeting pleasures, but the relationships we build, the impact we have on others, and the way we live each moment with purpose and authenticity. The paradox of choice. Have you ever experienced the overwhelming feeling of too many options? We live in an era where choice seems like a luxury, yet it often brings more anxiety than freedom. Imagine being faced with an infinite selection of things, from a supermarket aisle filled with dozens of types of cereal to the endless profiles on a dating app. You would think that more choice means more freedom, right? But here lies the paradox. The more choices we have, the more we doubt our decisions. What if we could have picked a better option? What if there's something better out there waiting for us? This constant second guessing leads to what psychologists call choice overload, a mental state where we struggle to make decisions and feel regretful even after making them. But why does this happen? It's because our brains are wired to crave certainty and simplicity. When we have too many options, it becomes difficult to weigh them all, and the fear of making the wrong choice paralyzes us. Ironically, the more choices we face, the less free we feel. Could it be that less is truly more? What if the solution is not to seek more choices, but to embrace the ones we already have? To let go of the idea that there is a perfect option out there, and to accept that all decisions involve trade offs. The true freedom may not lie in having endless options, but in the ability to choose without fear, to commit to a decision, and to let go of the anxiety of the unknown. The existential dilemma. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to live authentically in a world that constantly pressures us to conform? The idea of living a life true to oneself becomes more and more challenging. The existential dilemma arises when we confront the meaning of our existence. Are we simply a collection of actions and decisions, or is there a deeper, intrinsic purpose to our lives. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argue that life itself has no inherent meaning. We must create meaning through our choices and actions. This freedom to create our own meaning is both liberating and terrifying. If life has no predetermined purpose, then it is up to us to shape it. But what happens when we fail to make those choices? What if we spend our lives drifting, searching for something but never truly finding it? The existentialist viewpoint encourages us to embrace the absurdity of life. There is no script, no roadmap, no external meaning waiting to be discovered. Instead, we are invited to create our own narratives, to act with courage and authenticity, despite the uncertainty that comes with it. The real question becomes, how will you define your life when the world has no answer for you? The philosophy of time. Time, our most precious, yet most elusive resource. But what is time, really? Is it a continuous flow from past to present to future? Or is it something more subjective, an experience unique to each individual? In physics, time is often treated as a linear progression, a constant force driving us forward. But from a philosophical standpoint, time is far more complex. The past is gone, the future is uncertain, and the present slips away before we can fully grasp it. Some argue that time is an illusion, something that only exists in our perception. If time doesn't exist outside of our minds, does that mean we are free from its constraints? If time is merely a construct, how does this change our relationship with it? Are we slaves to the clock, or can we learn to transcend time itself? Imagine living in a world where time no longer rules your actions, where you are free to experience life in its fullness without the pressure of deadlines or aging. Could this be the key to finding peace? Perhaps the real challenge is not to control time, but to embrace it, acknowledging its fleeting nature and making the most of the present moment. The meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? This question has puzzled philosophers, theologians, and thinkers for centuries. On the surface, life seems to be a collection of experiences, choices, and actions. But when we step back and look at it as a whole, it feels incomplete. We are born, we live, and then we die. In between, we chase after goals, seek fulfillment, and search for answers. But the ultimate meaning of life remains elusive. For some, the meaning of life is tied to religious beliefs. Many religious traditions teach that life has a divine purpose, that our existence is part of a greater plan orchestrated by a higher power. In this view, the meaning of life is given to us by God, and our task is to fulfill this purpose through faith, devotion, and righteous living. For others, the meaning of life may be found in the pursuit of knowledge, personal growth, or happiness. Existentialist philosophers, such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, argue that life has no inherent meaning and that it is up to each individual to create meaning through their choices and actions. In this view, the meaning of life is not something given to us, but something we must actively construct through our experiences, relationships, and aspirations. But what happens when we question the meaning of life itself? Is it possible that we have been searching for the wrong kind of meaning all along? Perhaps the search for meaning is itself the key to understanding the human experience. It is not the answers we find that matter, but the journey we take to discover them. In this way, the meaning of life may lie not in a fixed destination, but in the process of seeking, questioning, and exploring. The ship of Theseus paradox. Imagine you own a ship, and over the years, you begin to replace its parts. First the sails, then the mast, then the hull. Eventually, every part of the ship has been replaced. Is it still the same ship? And if all the original parts are gathered together and reassembled into a new ship, which one is the true ship of Theseus? This paradox challenges our understanding of identity and continuity. It suggests that identity is not tied to the material components of an object, but rather to the relationships between those components and the functions they perform. In the case of the ship of Theseus, it's not the individual parts that define the ship's identity, but rather the idea of shipness that persists through the continuous replacement of parts. This paradox can also be applied to the human experience. As we age, our bodies undergo constant change. Cells regenerate, organs wear out, and our physical appearance shifts. If we are continuously changing, is there a core self that remains the same throughout our lives? Are we the same person we were when we were children? Or are we a new individual with each passing moment? The ship of Theseus forces us to consider whether identity is fixed or fluid, and whether we can truly ever be the same person from one moment to the next. The Trolley Problem. The trolley problem is a classic thought experiment that asks us to confront the moral dilemmas that arise when we must make life and death decisions. Imagine a trolley heading toward 5 people who are tied to the tracks. You stand next to a lever that could switch the trolley onto another track where only one person is tied. Should you pull the lever and sacrifice one person to save 5? The trolley problem raises important ethical questions about the value of individual lives and the concept of utilitarianism, the idea that we should always choose the option that maximizes overall happiness or minimizes suffering. According to utilitarianism, pulling the lever and sacrificing one person to save 5 is the morally correct choice. However, this decision is not without its ethical complications. By actively intervening, you are directly causing someone's death, whereas if you do nothing, you are merely allowing the natural course of events to unfold. This paradox forces us to consider the ethics of intervention and inaction, as well as the consequences of our choices. Should we act in a way that maximizes the greater good? Or should we avoid harming others, even if it means sacrificing the lives of many to protect the few? The trolley problem doesn't offer easy answers, but it invites us to explore the complexities of moral decision making and to question our own values and priorities. The Allegory of the Cave. Plato's Allegory of the Cave is one of the most famous metaphors in philosophy. In the allegory, prisoners are chained inside a cave, facing a wall. Behind them, fire casts shadows on the wall, and the prisoners perceive these shadows to be the only reality. They have no knowledge of the outside world and believe the shadows to be the true nature of existence. One prisoner is freed and exposed to the world outside the cave. Initially, he is blinded by the light, but over time, he comes to see the world in its true form. He realizes that the shadows on the wall were merely illusions, and that there is a far greater reality beyond the cave. The allegory of the cave symbolizes the journey from ignorance to knowledge, from illusion to truth. Plato uses the cave as a metaphor for the limitations of human perception and the challenges of understanding the true nature of reality. The prisoners in the cave are trapped by their limited perspective, unable to see beyond the shadows of their understanding. The freed prisoner represents the philosopher who seeks truth by questioning assumptions, challenging established beliefs, and expanding their view of the world. But what about us? Are we still living in the cave, only able to perceive shadows on the wall? Are there truths about the world, about ourselves, that we have yet to discover? The allegory of the cave challenges us to examine the nature of our own perceptions and to consider the possibility that the reality we see is not the full picture. The paradox of the grandfather. The grandfather. Paradox is a classic thought experiment that explores the logical consequences of time travel. Imagine you travel back in time and accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. If this happens, your parent would never be born, and by extension, neither would you. If you were never born, then how could you have traveled back in time to prevent the meeting in the first place? This paradox presents a logical contradiction that arises when we consider the implications of altering the past. If we can change the past, it seems that we could create situations where events become logically inconsistent, like erasing our own existence or creating multiple timelines. Time travel, in this sense, creates a paradox that challenges our understanding of causality and the nature of time itself. The grandfather paradox also raises questions about fate and free will. If we could change the past, would we be free to shape our own destinies? Or are we bound by a set of predetermined events? Do we have the power to change our future? Or is the course of history fixed, regardless of our actions?